All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. My name is Leila Logesico. I'm the chair. A few words about how the meeting is going to proceed tonight. As per our usual protocol, applicants will be given an opportunity to give us a full and uninterrupted presentation. Following this presentation, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions to the applicant. Then following this question session, I will open up the floor to members of the public. Members of the public will have the opportunity to make comments and ask questions to the application. The applicant will then be given the opportunity to address these questions and comments. Then we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. We will do just that, discussing each application. A motion will be made, and then this motion will be voted on. I will mention that tonight, very unfortunately, this committee does not have quorum. And therefore, any action will have to be taken by the Executive Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. The Executive Committee meets the second Tuesday in the month of January. This information is available on our website with the exact date. The Executive Committee meeting is a public meeting of Community Board 5, and members of the public are able to attend this public meeting. During this Executive Committee meeting, there will not be an opportunity for members of the public to speak. Members of the public who wish to speak on any items on the agenda tonight must speak tonight during the public session of this committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for replay on our YouTube channel for future reference. So that is for my little introduction on how this meeting is going to proceed. We have 4 items tonight on the agenda. Some of those items are action items, meaning that Community Board 5 will take a position, and others are at this stage for discussion only, and then they will become action items at subsequent meetings of this committee. Also for good housekeeping, given that we are in a hybrid format and our camera system does not necessarily disclose the names of the participants, I will read the names of the committee members who are here with us tonight, and I thank you for that. We are joined by Aaron Ford, Vice Chair, David Achilles, Mary Brosnahan, Julie Chu, and EJ Kalafarsky. So thank you for being here. Okay, so the first item tonight on the agenda is an application by the Department of City Planning for a zoning tax amendment to permit gaming facilities in New York City. For a little bit of context, but I'm sure that our friends from DCP will also explain that. The state legislature 2 years ago authorized, actually through consultation with voters, the issuance of licenses for gaming facilities in the state of New York. 4 of those licenses were attributed to upstate New York, and 3 for downstate. We are finally in the process of reviewing these 3 downstate license applications. They are under a state review process for the citing and the approval. The big challenge that the city is faced with at this juncture is that currently gaming facilities are not permitted under the existing zoning resolution. So for any casino to be cited in New York City, a zoning tax amendment needs to be adopted. And this is the reason for this application. Just also for context, there are currently 2 known proposals for a casino within Community Board 5. One of them is at Saks Fifth Avenue on the top 3 floors of the department store. and the other one is at 1515 Broadway in the Theater District. So this is for the context, and now turning it to Stephen, Ezra, and Janelle. Stephen, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thank you. So I can share screen and bring it up, or if you have it, you can open it up too, whatever works for you guys.
I think if you want to share your screen, that would be perfect.
Okay, give me a second here. Okay, are you guys seeing that?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to be presenting this to you. My name is Stephen Johnson. I'm with the Department of City Planning, and the department is proposing a citywide zoning text amendment to allow a gaming facilities use as a permitted use in certain commercial districts. That's C4, C5, C6, C7, and C8 districts, and M1, M2, M3 districts. And as Layla mentioned, gaming facilities, casinos, racetracks are not currently permitted, legally permitted in New York City. So what is a gaming facility? So the term gaming facility is defined by the state as let me read this off my notes. The premises approved under a state gaming license, which includes a gaming area and any other non-gaming structure related to the gaming use, and may include hotels, restaurants, and other amenities. So a gaming facility is a broader term encompassing more than just like a casino. It also encompasses and could include a hotel, restaurants. Some of these proposals have a theater or a convention center, parking, those types of things. It doesn't have to have those things, but it does encompass those things if that's what they're proposing for their facility. So the text amendment would facilitate the development and operation of up to 3 gaming facilities in New York City, as approved and licensed through a recent state defined process, which they released in the beginning of the year. And the proposed text would deem the gaming facility as allowed under the zoning resolution. So this text amendment is a result of a January 2023 announcement by the state to solicit proposals for these 3 gaming facility licenses. And the entire process was kicked off in a statewide referendum back 10 years ago that was approved by New York voters that authorized 7 commercial casinos. 4 of those have been issued upstate, and those gaming facilities, those casinos have been built and are in operation. And that leaves the 3 remaining licenses. Now, the purpose of those gaming facilities, according to the state, are to encourage economic development, tourism, create jobs, increase revenue for schools, and lower property taxes. So that's kind of the idea behind facilitating these types of facilities. So the New York State Gaming Facility Location Board, which was created by the Gaming Commission, which controls the entire process. The GFLB, overseeing this application and licensing process, made the announcement in January. In this document that you can go on their website, I actually have a copy right here called Request for Applications to Develop and Operate a Gaming Facility in New York City. So if you go on their website, they have a lot of documents, a lot of information on what an application is required to do and what they need to do for their application and the parameters for the application. And one of the things that came out with this application is this new citing and review process, which we'll get to in the next slide. But just to wrap up this slide, New York City does not have any gambling, casino, racetracks, etc., except at Aqueduct. And that's permitted because that's on state-owned property. So they have the Aqueduct racetrack, which I think is maybe even 100 years old, over 100 years old. And then more recently, the Resorts World gaming facility, which is completely mechanics and lottery machines. There's no people there. It's not what I would typically think of as a casino or anything, but that's what is permitted. And of course, New York City OTB, off-track betting sites, there's 6 established corporations around the state. The one in New York City went bankrupt in 2010. So what we're seeing here is what the Gaming Commission controls in the state. So you can see on this map, they have the different facilities that they have. Over here, they have something that they refer to as Indian gaming. They have 7 facilities. They have video lottery machines, thoroughbred racetracks, and those types of things. But right here, we're looking at, of course, the lower downstate region here. Number 1 in the orange and the one in the purple, that's Aqueduct, and that's Resorts World combined facility on state property. Number 2 is the Belmont Racetrack in Elmont, Long Island. And then Suffolk has this number 1, which is Jake's Casino. And then the green 5 here is the Yonkers facility. So the Yonkers is existing, and so is the Belmont Racetrack, and then the Aqueduct Racetrack. So that's kind of the control of what they have so far in the city. So here we have the process. So as I mentioned, from the 2023 request for applications, they created this new siting and review process where they created this CAC, or Community Advisory Committee. So the idea here is that this would be the sort of public review of these facilities if there's an application in your neighborhood. So the CAC consists of these 6 members: the governor, the mayor, the state senator, assembly member, president, the borough president, and your local council member. And then these 6 people would lead the review of any gaming facility proposal in New York City if this citywide text amendment passes. So what I'm describing to you now is the state process. Now, what I'm here for is the city use zoning text amendment. And that's what we're discussing tonight, smaller picture, and what you would be voting up or down on, approving, etc. So what is interesting, I find interesting actually, in Community District 5 is that the 2 proposals that you have that Leila mentioned at 1515 Broadway and Saks, is those are 2 buildings that are already built, right? So these other facilities have not been built, and they have a whole slew of review processes that they're going to be going through with the community advisory committees. And a couple of these applications actually have actions at city planning outside of the zoning text amendment. But for you guys, you have 2 existing buildings, and you could think of that as a pro or a con. The pro is that it's already built, so you already have an idea of what the impacts would be and the parameters and the envelope of the building. So the con could be that you want to see more development, something new, exciting, something more engaging for tourism. So I mean, that's kind of the pro and con of it. So the idea here is that at some point when the state releases their timeline, their schedule, these CACs will be created, and they would then get these applications that would be sent to the Gaming Facilities Location Board. And then they would create these CACs, which would start the process for review of the applications. So for 1515 Broadway, you would have Councilmember Botcher, Liz Kruger would be on that, and of course, Tony Simone. For the Saks building, I believe it's still Liz Kruger, but it would be Keith Powers and Alex Boris who would be reviewing that on the local level, in addition to Mark Levine, of course. So if an application is approved by a 2/3 vote, it would then be sent along to the Gaming Facility Location Board. So all the ones that are approved in the downstate region, they would then receive and review. And what they would be reviewing for those 4 are these items here: economic activity, revenue impact, local siting impacts, including environmental impacts, workforce enhancement, and diversity framework. And then on the bottom here, you have Kristen Buckley, who's the secretary to the Gaming Commission. If you have questions about the state process, particular questions about how it's being run, you can send those questions to her at her email and phone number. But they also have a list of questions that have already been answered on their website. So that could be, have a lot of information for you. So also, in addition to this, I wanted to say, if the CACs, so we have a situation, if the zoning text amendment is approved, then these 9 applications, what I'll get to in a moment, will show you, we'll then go to the CACs. The CACs can approve all the applications, or they might not approve any of them. But in order for them to take the next step, they have to be approved by the CAC. So the Gaming Facilities Location Board might get a dozen applications that have been approved. They might not get any. We've, as I'm sure you know, as you've discussed internally, there's been a lot of speculation how probably Aqueduct and Yonkers, because they've already been cited, they're already established, that those might be an easier way to get a new gaming facility location in. So if those were 2 that get approved, then there would only be one other one that was floating around. And that's not including anything else that might be being proposed on Long Island. So the text amendment itself, this is just a short breakdown of the text amendments. So like I mentioned, it's only in C4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and M1, 2, 3. And the idea is that it's only allowing the gaming facility use into the zoning resolution for the first time, which is not permitted. Something that I want to really highlight here is that these next couple of bullets here is that the gaming facility license and this text amendment are tied together. So somebody can't propose, a new gaming facility in 10 years because they have some idea for it. It's only for these 3 licenses. So once these 3 licenses are gone, this text amendment is no longer of any use to anyone. So if we went through the whole process again and the state does a state referendum and it's approved by New York state voters and there's more licenses floating around, then New York City would then decide, okay, are we interested in these licenses? If they decided that they were, then we would have to do an entirely new text amendment for those new licenses. So again, it's just these 3 licenses, as I've mentioned. And as I also talked about earlier, it's also the related uses. So we're saying that, they like to have a hotel by these facilities. They like to have other amenities. So that's the entire gaming facility is what's being reviewed here. They don't need to have those things, but they could. And then if it's approved by the CAC, reviewed by that, what we're calling like more of the public review process through the CAC, and then it moves on to the Gaming Facilities Location Board and they approve it, then it shall be deemed to have satisfied all applicable zoning resolution regulations if they get the license. Let me see if I can get to the next page here. For some reason it's not working. I think I just kind of went over these already, but I think the one thing I want to mention on this slide is it doesn't relate to future modifications of an approved license. So hypothetically, let's say there's a casino, a gambling facility that's approved somewhere in Manhattan, and it has 2 towers and a 500 space parking garage. They build it, it's successful, and the operators say, well, we want another tower and we want 500 more parking spaces. They can't just do that. They have to come back to city planning and the city planning commission to get that approval. You don't automatically get other things added into their gaming facility. Now they could change, things that don't, I don't want to say they don't matter to us, but I guess they don't really matter to us. If they have a restaurant in the gaming facility that goes under, they can change the restaurant. That has no impact on our zoning or what we're trying to do here. They have their space for the restaurant, they can have whatever restaurant. So, but if they want to do like serious changes, they have to come back and get that reviewed by the city planning commission. Okay, so here are the 9 proposals, the 9 proposals that we have. The 5 in Manhattan, the Western Rail Yards, the Avenir and Hudson Yards at the old Mercedes site, the Times Square one at 1515 Broadway, Saks at 611 Fifth Avenue, and of course, Freedom Plaza in Community District 6, where I was just at last night. The one in the Bronx is the Ferry Point Golf Course. It's just been, the lease has been taken over by Bolly's, and they're putting together a package an application. Number 7 is the Willits Future Queens project, which is in the Shea Stadium parking lot with the current parking lot. They're proposing something there. 8 is Aqueduct, and then 9 is the Coney Island proposal. Now, the one thing I want to mention on this slide that's different that's new information for you guys is that 4 of these proposals have actions outside of the text amendment. So like I mentioned, Saks and Times at 1515 Broadway, those fit completely within the citywide text amendment, which was the whole purpose of the text amendment, because we don't have the capacity to review 9 applications and go through a whole environmental review process at the city. So the purpose of the text amendment was to create this efficiency to get these reviewed and get them through the process as approved by the CACs. So Saks, 1515 Broadway, the one in Hudson Yards, and Freedom Plaza, and then of course number 8, Resorts World Aqueduct, they fit within the text amendment as we've written it. Everything is good with the text amendment, anything they want to propose there, and looking through the lens of the CACs. But the other ones do not. So the easiest one to do to explain is number 7, Willits, which they have their scoping hearing tomorrow. They're on parkland. So there's no zoning district on the parkland. So they have to go to the state to alienate the property. They have to map a zoning district. They have to make changes to the roadways in and out, because the proposal would likely increase cars coming in and out frequently. So those actions are going to have their own ULURP process that we are doing now at City Planning. And we're just starting those right now. And we hope to get, we don't have a timeline, but sometime next year, those would go into the public review process for those types of actions that aren't covered. And I think just to wrap it up, as I mentioned, it's in these particular zoning districts. We don't want it in any residential districts. That's the map here shows the yellows are the districts where it would be permitted. All the ones that are being proposed are in C districts, as proposed here. It's only for the 3 licenses, no more. And it has to be approved by the Gaming Commission via the Gaming Facilities Location Board and the Community Advisory Committee. And then if it's in New York City, it has to also be, this text amendment would then have to be approved. And then that would give these CACs the ability to consider the applications. So that wraps up the presentation, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. We may actually want to keep the presentation up, because I think we're gonna have questions.
Sure.
We can start actually with, I have a question on the map. So if we understand correctly, only a license that has been granted by the Gaming Commission will be considered as being a conforming use in New York City under this test, right?
That's correct.
And yet the map shows areas that have that are not within any of these proposals. So for example, there's a whole chunk of area that is located in CB1 that would be deemed permissible. Why are you including these areas, and why not do your very narrow spot zoning of, okay, they can be anywhere on these 9 dots?
Did you say spot zoning?
I did. Can you believe that? I know.
I can't believe that. So
I know.
So these are just showing.
But it is kind of, I will not editorialize, and I will save my
Yeah.
comment, but in essence, this is what you're doing. You're doing spot zoning, but
Well,
you're dressing it with a little bit more meat that could have unintended consequences. I'm going to tell you, the end logic of my question is that, as you mentioned in your explanation, we could be in a scenario where none of these applications are approved, and yet
That's
there
right.
is an opportunity for a casino license, and therefore another applicant may come and say, hey, as part of these three, I would like to put a casino in CB1 or elsewhere in CB5, and it would be permitted because it is on the map. So can you actually speak to how the map came to be?
Yeah, there's certain procedures that we work with at city planning in relation to the zoning resolution. So we've reviewed different types of zoning districts and felt like these commercial districts would be a good fit for a gaming facility. So we didn't know where these proposals were until they came out with the application process, and we started talking to the different people in the proposals who are making the applications. So the idea is the C districts make the most sense. The M districts are only in relationship to consistency within the use regulations. So none of these are proposed in M districts, but the way that we write the uses for the zoning resolution is that these entertainment uses mirror those into the M districts. I mean, so we want to make it as broad as possible in that sense, and then narrow it down as the thing moves along. And to address the issue of somebody coming in later and proposing something in, lower Manhattan, they can't do that because there won't be any licenses to do that, because the text is tied to these three licenses. So once those licenses have been awarded to the developer and the gaming company, that's it. We would have to do a text amendment in order to create, if there were any other, there aren't any other licenses, but if there were future licenses approved by the state, we would have to do a text amendment if we agreed that we were still looking to.
We understand that, but at the same time, let's stick with these three licenses that are going to be awarded. If none of these applications, none of the 9 applications that are on the map right now are awarded, and actually it's more than 9 because there's also some in Nassau. So if none of the applications that are currently being reviewed gets awarded, then there will be another 3 sites that will be proposed by other applicants. And therefore, those casino licenses could land in areas that are anywhere that is colored on the map. In essence, they could be anywhere on the map, right?
So
they could be, so long as they are one of those, this first batch of 3, they can be anywhere on the map. They don't have to be those 9 that are on the dots.
So there's 2 issues with that. So the first issue is the state is trying to generate money for their budget, and they're trying to generate money for the economic development aspect of the project. So the state wants to award these licenses. So and if there's licenses that get to that approval level, they're definitely going to try to award them. So there's no incentive for them not to award them. So
but at the same time, go ahead. I will save my comments.
Yeah, we don't think there's going to be any licenses that are not awarded. The second issue is the way that they've written their document for the applications. It's related to these 3 licenses and with a schedule for these 3 licenses. So I agree with you that there is a possibility, hypothetically, that there could be a license that's not awarded. So if there's one license that's not awarded, they would then have to generate a whole new application process. And when they generate the whole new application process, while the text, if the text passes, would still be valid for that license, the new application process would have information in it as to how that's going to be cited, which would replicate some of the things that are in there. And then the city would then have a say as to whether they were interested still in having that license. Because they could just as easily say, you know, we're having too many problems downstate. We awarded 2 licenses. You know, it's way easier for us to get a license in upstate New York. Why don't we put one by Niagara Falls, right? So they have other things that they could do with the license. But I see your point.
Okay, yeah, just to move on, I have one follow-up question on the map. The map is pretty blurry and I have a hard time understanding where this, so if you look at the dots on Manhattan,
Yeah.
then you have those sort of like 2 prongs that go up, and one of those prongs looks like it's within Central Park. And if it is not within Central Park, then it would be along 5th Avenue. But can you just tell us what this area represents? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's strictly related to just where the zoning district is. It just matches. I have a little bit clearer map here. Maybe I can zoom in. I don't know if you could see that a little bit better. But that's just where the zoning district is. So anywhere there's a C4, it shows the red. Anywhere where there's C5, it's red. So
But where is it? Is it 5th Avenue?
yeah, I think that's going straight up. It looks like it's going straight up 5th Avenue. I mean, I can get you a clearer map on that if you want to.
Okay, but it is not going through Central Park.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Opening up to questions from members of the committee. EJ, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I think more about some of the hypothetical scenarios. If, say, all of the CACs ended in a situation where they didn't get a 2/3 vote to approve, I think you could end up with a situation like you were saying, Layla, where, yeah, for example, the mayor and the borough president and a city councilor decide to vote against, each of the 3 applications, each of the 9 applications that are currently available. You could end up with a situation where you're soliciting an entirely new set of applications, which could be placed anywhere inside the yellow zones.
Correct.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm also curious about another conceivable situation, which is, a certain number are approved and go to the location board, but the location board decides they don't like the particular combination that came to them. Can let's say only 3 or fewer get approved by the CACs and go to the location board. Is the location board at that point bound to select those 3 specific locations because only 3 were approved by their CACs and they need to give out 3 permits? Or could they say that they don't like that particular combination, withhold one of them and trigger a new application process
So
themselves?
just to reframe a little bit, I mean, Stephen is here really to represent the zoning tax amendment, not really what the gaming commission is going to do. So I think our job here tonight is really to to poke at the zoning tax amendment, with understanding how the gaming commission is going to operate. But really our mandate tonight is really to look at the zoning tax amendment. So I actually have a question on that, Stephen. If I understand correctly, any use that is within the casino will be deemed accessory to the casino use and therefore permitted?
If it's related to the gaming, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Does that mean that a hotel would no longer need a special permit under this particular provision?
Yes.
So currently, a hotel requires a special permit anywhere in New York City, but were this hotel be part of the casino, then there would be no need for a special permit.
That's correct.
Okay. And the same holds true for a restaurant. A restaurant would be permitted no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't know that there are any restrictions on restaurants and eating establishments and C428 and 123, but if there were, then those would be no longer applicable. The same holds true for, let's say, a cannabis dispensary. If it is considered a good idea to have a cannabis dispensary in a casino, which I would certainly see lots of people thinking that it's the best idea, and if they didn't have it, maybe I give it to them. Then that would also be deemed permitted. I mean, they would have to obtain the proper license from the state. Same with the restaurant with the liquor, but there would be no restriction on that.
I would put a question mark on that one because I don't know how a cannabis dispensary would be considered affiliated with the casino. So, I mean, that on the face of it, that doesn't make sense to me. But I can't say whether that's true or not.
Okay. So I don't want to hog the floor too much, but also just so we understand, basically the Department of City Planning is not commenting in any way, shape, or form on what these casinos would look like. So you're not saying anything about the signage, you're not saying anything about the frontage, how many entrances, where they should be located. You're not saying anything about the public realm. You're not saying anything about parking facilities. You're not saying anything about the stuff that you usually say lots of things about. Is that fair description?
So there's two things I want to say about that. So one, we wouldn't necessarily have a formal role in the CAC process. We fully expect to be participating. The mayor has a role. We work with the BP all the time. We work with the council member all the time when there's a project in this neighborhood. So we are experts in the field and we expect to be participating. The second issue is we see the existing zoning regulations as a benchmark. So whatever the zoning is where that proposal is, that's kind of a benchmark as to say, well, this is what could go in as of right. So, I mean, the example that I use, because it's easier to comprehend, is in Coney Island, right? There's like a 70-foot height limit in one of the areas where the proposal will be. So if there's a 70-foot height limit and the gaming facility is proposing an 80-foot tall building, that's something for discussion, right? It's like, is it worth it? It's like, I think a lot of people might say it is. It's only 10 feet taller. But if they're proposing an 800-foot tall hotel on the site, there's no way in hell that's going to get past, the CAC.
When you say passed by whom? By the CAC? I mean, the CAC can do whatever they want. They're not bound legally and administratively by any rule or regulation. It's not, I mean, they have discretion, correct?
They have discretion. They are the voting members and the elected officials from your community.
If they love the 800-foot tower and that's what they're enamored with, they can approve it. There's nothing that prohibits them, and certainly the zoning will not prohibit them from doing so. And certainly this text doesn't do that. Okay.
That's why I said it was the benchmark to review against.
Okay, got it. Other questions, Mike?
A similar thing. You said that there was, if the proposer wanted to build another tower, another 500 parking lot, 500 space parking structure, they would have to come back. But what is the minimum criteria to come back? Is it an increase in FAR at all? What is considered ancillary and what is considered major expansion?
So we have not established that with the state, but we've in our discussions, we've said the envelope that's approved is the envelope that's approved. So we all know there's this concept of substantial compliance, right? If they have 4-foot pavers on the ground and they're like, well, we want to change them to 3-foot pavers. I don't think that rises to the level. It might not rise to the level of a ULURP modification, right? But that's why I use the exaggerated example if they want to add another tower or if they want to add 500 spaces, because I don't think we've yet established what that is. But we're saying whatever is approved with that envelope, you better be okay with what is being approved.
Okay, other question, yeah, Aaron.
So I have a few, I'll do a couple and then I'll let others jump in, so I don't do them all in a row here, but. So going back to the discussion of accessory use with hotels. So again, just to be super clear, aside from the hotel special permit issue, what does that clause allow that wouldn't already be allowed in those zoning districts? Or is that really is the hotel special permit the only action that, like, what's the goal of including those other uses that would normally already be allowed in commercial districts?
So the idea is that anything that's affiliated with the casino is a use that would be deemed permissible. We don't, some of these things are not issues, if most places putting in a restaurant is not an issue. Certain areas, it's hard to get in a restaurant, but in Soho, I don't know. But, it's not an issue. But the idea is that if there's any other affiliated uses that are related to the casino, those would also be applicable. And those are something that the CACs would review. There was an example, I don't know if you watched the review session at the City Planning Commission, but one of the commissioners brought up a poker chip making facility as an affiliated use. And if the poker chips were made for that casino, that could be deemed an affiliated use. But she was implying that there was some sort of environmental impact. If there's environmental impacts related to an affiliated use, that would have to be disclosed in the environmental review that's being done by the state for site-specific uses and related to that proposal.
But you're just as a follow-up and maybe to give another example, the Department of City Planning will not do this environmental assessment.
That's right. So the
Okay.
CP is
And then
not, except we are doing some environmental review for those other actions that are.
But those are actions that are entirely separate from the zoning tax amendment. It is
That's
taking
right.
parkland. I mean, I'm not going to comment on what's going on in Queens. This is not the proper forum, but let's just say that I really have strong feelings on that. Just to give another example, Aaron, for example, a amusement ride would become permitted. An arcade that may not be permitted in a commercial district, but is permitted in a manufacturing district, then would become permitted at any of these casinos. A golf simulator, which sounds pretty innocuous, would be permitted, but a paintball shooting thingy, I don't know how you call these things, where people lose an eye from time to time, that would be permitted.
Right, okay, so we're talking about a lot more than just hotels.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
So in your map, and again, I'll try to keep my questions related to our district, but again, the map is a little fuzzy, so it's hard to tell, but I'll just stay in Manhattan area. So I'm noticing that, so the little sort of line that Layla was mentioning, asking about Central Park, when I looked at the other map, it does look like that is up Madison Avenue on the east side. Some of that is in a historic district. So in your map, your dark yellow zones, which I realize are commercial districts, is this proposing that a casino would be allowed in a historic district?
So this is only related to the zoning resolution. So if there's other issues, so one of the reasons why these gaming facility proposals have been coming to us is because they want to know if there's any other actions that they need taken. at the city, because part of the requirement to get the license is that they have all their approvals in place and they meet the local regulations. So they don't have approval from landmarks if they're proposing something that's in a historic building or district or anything of that nature.
Wait, but LPC has absolutely no say on use. So provided that the use is permitted by Department of City Planning, LPC cannot even comment on the use. They cannot say, well, we're going to turn down this application because we don't approve casinos.
So what I'll do, none of these proposals are in historic districts or in historic buildings, landmark buildings. I'll get confirmation from our council that whether or not they would need, if they were in a historic district, whether or not they would need to get approval by LPC for a proposal for a hypothetical gaming facility in a historic district.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next question, Aaron.
You mentioned, yeah, this is quick. I know this is out of our district, but you have, is it correct that your map has Rikers Island as a yellow potential casino site here? Am I reading
Yes.
that accurate?
Yes.
Is that zoned commercial right now?
Yeah,
So the
what
dark-
is it?
Yeah. Let me go to the darker map. You might be able to see it better.
It's sort of the same question about Governor's Island. I wasn't aware that Governor's Island was zoned commercial either in its present form as a park, but obviously.
It was zoned. So the handle on the ice cream cone is, but they're tied to, Governor's Island is tied to, they already have a strict programming on what they can do there. They have
Yeah,
parkland.
no, I know there's some complicated legacy with that. I just, those two jumped out at me when looking at the
Sure.
map, and I realized, that's out of our district, but I just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, I know Governor's Island is a very complicated, separate discussion.
Okay,
Yes.
next.
You mentioned just very quickly that, there was no capacity to conduct 9 environmental reviews. Is that just an administration? Like, when you say capacity, you mean DCP does not have the manpower to do 9 environmental reviews, or the city in general? Like, can you just speak to what exactly capacity from a city agency perspective you are referencing there?
So when the state announced this in January, they established the initial timeline. Unfortunately, they're supposed to be getting us, just as a side note, they're supposed to be coming out with probably a time frame somewhere in first quarter next year. So that will help clarify a lot of these issues. But city planning, if we were to take on 9 applications of this size and structure to go through the EULA process, it would be very difficult. It would be impossible for us to get through in the timeline that the state created. So the reason why we're doing the text amendment is that reduces the number of things that we would have to then go through the regular EULA process, which we think would be duplicated with the CAC process that the state created. So that's what I mean by capacity. So we would then be taking, too much time to review these, to get these through the process, and then have them not pass anyway. Then it would be like, a waste of everybody's time and effort. So we think this is the most efficient way that we can try to get this through, and most efficient way for the state to meet the state's guidelines, the time frame that they have, while still retaining the public review for the 4 applications that have actions outside, and the CAC would then be the process for the public input on any gaming proposals.
Okay, I have a follow-up on that, Stephen. What kind of environmental review was done actually for this specific zoning tax amendment? Did you do any IS or NEA?
No, it was originally part of the economic opportunity proposal, which is, as you know, extremely packed with very important stuff. So it was decided to separate this out because this is complicated and a massive project on its own. So it was decided to separate them out. So this would run on its own time frame as a text amendment.
And
But
did you do a separate EA?
no, it was a conceptual analysis that was done within the economic opportunity proposal. So there was a
In which it does
conceptual.
not even belong anymore. So
Right.
can we actually see the EA for the zoning text amendment?
It's in the,
Because it's not. I mean, there, you know, I think it's on, you know, towards the end, there is a paragraph that says, now the gaming zoning text amendment is part of a separate action. So
That's
where
right.
is the data that leads to the conclusion that it's a negative declaration?
so that was deemed acceptable within the EO environmental review, because what's going to happen is that these gaming facilities have their own site-specific environmental review that's being led by the state.
But the state has different requirements, different goals, different objectives, different metrics. Where is the environmental review conducted by the Department of City Planning?
As I said, it's within the EO project. It got a negative declaration and no
But it is,
significant
so where-
adverse impact.
my question again, I'm sorry, but where is the data?
Well, my answer is the same. So we can keep going around.
Okay, so I will then conclude that there is no specific data on the zoning text amendment. So the environmental review for you know, a casino in Times Square, what it would cause in terms of congestion, in terms of social economic impacts, in terms of you know, additional pollution, this data is not available.
So those impacts would be disclosed in the State Environmental Quality Review Act when each gaming facility that's being proposed would be reviewed by the state.
Under SECRA, but not under seeker.
That's right, not by the state, not by the city, but by the state.
Okay, so I mean, I will keep my comments in comments, but I'm gonna be out of order and I will allow myself to be. You're basically abrogating, I mean, the Department of City Planning is abrogating its responsibility to zone, plan, and assess environmental impacts. This was a comment. Mary.
Yeah, you already zeroed in on one of my concerns, which was the usage for the arcade and amusement rides. Could you speak to, you know, all these seem to conjure sort of the Las Vegas model of these gaming facilities. Would this include nude dancing and stripping? Is that a use that would be permitted?
That's a very interesting question. I personally have not contemplated that. I can tell you that nobody has proposed that. I mean, I think dancing, I don't think anybody has a problem with dancing, but there are strict regulations as to where those can go in the city. But I can confirm that with our council about nude dancing.
Okay,
And
other questions? Yeah.
I just have one more question about the process at the city level. And I can expand on this, I suppose, when we get to comments, but my question is, there is a scenario where CACs approve, for example, only the 3 that are currently allowed by the text amendment, and thus no ULURPs are required for any of the 3, you know, casinos. And there's also a situation where CACs only approve 3 other ones, and the city is now required to do 3. I mean, like, hearing that the point of the text amendment was to avoid doing 9 ULURPs. You still could theoretically end up in a situation where you need to do 3 ULURPs if those are the theoretically 3 three permits that are approved by the CACs. Is that, both of those are like potential outcomes? Is that correct?
The city is not doing ULURPs on projects that we're not the lead on. So the state will be doing site-specific ULURPs for every project that gets to that point in the process. The city's doing environmental review on a couple of the applications that have extra actions outside of the citywide text amendment only. So we're only doing a couple. So that's
It's not all of the other six.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
right.
Stephen, you just said the state is going to do ULURP. The state doesn't do
Oh, did I
ULURP.
say that? Yeah, I didn't mean that. The state is doing the environmental review is what I meant. Sorry, I
Okay.
misspoke.
Like under the state criteria, which is a different process than ULURP.
Yeah, the state is definitely not doing ULURP.
Okay, so this was also presented to CB4 as well as CB6 because there are known applications in these districts. Can you tell us? So I actually have the draft resolution from CB4 and I will read from it. But can you tell us the position from CB6? committee?
CB6. Yes, I presented to CB6 last night, and their committee was unanimously against with one abstention, I believe.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? Yeah, Aaron.
So Stephen, in terms of the zoning text amendment covers the three potential that would be in New York City. In the scenario that one goes to Westchester, one goes to Nassau, and that the city obviously could get up to three. But in the scenario that the city gets only two or one, I guess what originally, I guess the intention is to push all 9 applications, then the state is gonna literally decide. But in the scenario that only one of this batch of 3 is in the city, this zoning text amendment would expire and not sort of remain valid for a second or third site that would be approved at a later site. I mean, you clarified that, right? So in this scenario, because the zoning text amendment specifically mentions that the idea of 3 in New York City, but there might not be 3 in New York City.
There
So
might
am
be
I correct
0.
to say that that expires even if only one is decided to go New York City? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just the 3 licenses that are approved that can go anywhere, that originally could go anywhere upstate. Then they said, let's put them downstate somewhere. And once those 3 licenses have been awarded, then the text amendment, there's nothing for the text amendment to be associated with. If there were any new licenses that were approved by the state, by voters, and New York City decided they want to be back in the game of potentially getting one, we would have to do a whole new text amendment if we were going to take this route again.
Got it, understood. But is the intention for the city to get all 3 in perfect scenario?
I think, I'm
Is that-
sorry, this is really not about
Okay.
the zoning resolution. We really need to move on. I can answer that offline. Other questions? Okay. All right, so just for the record, I am going to quickly mention that Community Board 4 also heard the matter. They voted unanimously to disapprove the proposal. They raise a number of issues and concerns, including the fact that the integrity of the ULURP process is in grave jeopardy because of this zoning text amendment. Okay, all right, so seeing no further questions from members of the committee, I will open up the floor to members of the public. members of the public who are in attendance with us tonight, if you have any questions or comments, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. Any question or comment from members of the public? Questions, comments? Okay, so seeing none, we are moving to business session. During business session only, oh wait, a hand went up. Sandra Nance, you are permitted to speak. You can introduce yourself and tell us your question or comment.
Yes, I just wanted to bring to your attention that the Minskoff Theater is, I believe, a landmarked theater. So the LPC would have some kind of comment review time, is my question.
Yeah, very, very good point. It is indeed a landmarked building. Do you have any other questions or comments, Sandra?
No, I don't at this time. I'm just eager to see if you are able to come to a vote, your committee.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments from members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, Stephen, do you want to address this question? So I do believe that 1515 Broadway is a landmarked building.
So I believe, I'm not sure whether it's the inside of the theater or the theater itself that's landmarked for the Minskoff. The theater, the theater is not going away in their proposal. The theater is staying there. There's a second theater, I think it's called the Palladium. That might be going away, but that's not a landmark theater. So certain areas of that proposal, things are not changing because it's already built, right? So I think they're talking about how the tower itself is changing as opposed to the theater inside. But
Okay.
that would come out more when they put out their application.
Okay, I think it is fair to assume that any alterations to the landmarked areas of the building, whether it's the interior or the exterior, that is landmarked, if there are any changes that are being proposed, additional signage, conversion of a window into a door, or more extensive modifications, that would be reviewed by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and they would only have jurisdiction on these questions. It would probably be a certificate of appropriateness, and the LPC would have to determine whether these modifications are appropriate to the landmark, rather than them having the ability to comment on the use. The use is really a land use matter and a Department of City Planning issue. All right, so let's move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. So, just once again, to frame a little bit the conversation, we in CB5 know that there are 2 applications, which is not to say that there could not be additional ones, but right now we know of 2 very clearly. Community Board 5, once the state announced that they were launching the gaming citing process, took it upon themselves to actually look at the impact of casinos in our district. In December of 2022, we actually held two meetings of this committee to actually look at the issue, one in November and the other one in December of 2022, so a year ago. And this board is on record saying that we oppose casinos in CB5. The 2 main reasons for our opposition are that A, we do not believe that the economic growth would be that significant in CB5. We are already a very strong economic driver of the city. Just for a point of data and information, there are close to 1 million jobs in CB5 alone. We have 3 times more jobs than any other community board, and the second behind us is CB1 with 300,000 jobs. We are the economic driver of the city, and a casino will not create the kind of growth that it may elsewhere, where there is need for economic stimulus and economic development. The second reason why we believe a casino in CB5 is not desirable is for its social impact. Addiction to gambling, loss of income are a serious problem, and we believe that CB5 should not encourage that kind of use. We also noted in our resolution that there are a number of SROs and shelters for a population that is vulnerable in the vicinity of Times Square, and were it to be a casino sited in this area, this population would be very vulnerable. We actually received testimony to that effect when we held our public session last year. So this is our general position on gaming facilities in CB5. Now what we're looking at tonight is there's a zoning tax amendment that would permit, as of right, a casino gaming use, provided that that these casinos have been licensed as part of this 3 licenses that are available downstate, for which the process has started under the auspices of the state. I will start with my comment by saying that, you know, I find it really troubling that such a massive change is undergoing very, very little review from the Department of City Planning. In essence, and once again, I have read the EA that is part of the environmental review that was done for the economic development. There is one paragraph that mentions gaming establishment that basically says it was going to be part of this text. We decided to make it a standalone. And that's it. There is no data, there is no analysis, there's no information on the socioeconomic impact that such an establishment would have. And I really feel that it is a missed opportunity because, when you think about Madison Square Garden, for example, the venue is required to follow so many guidelines. The signage has to be like this. The public realm, there are just so many criteria that are identified that, such a facility like an arena have to comply with. And here there's nothing, absolutely nothing on signage, absolutely nothing on the height of the building, the bulk of the building. And as much as, for us, it may not be such a problem because those 2 applications that we know of are in buildings that are already built. If these don't go through and a third one comes up, let's say for the site of Hotel Penn, if Vornado, as they had mentioned at some point, decides actually to get back into the game and put a casino there, this building could have any shape. The accessory use that could be within this building could be anything. A hotel could go there and it would not go through the special permit process. Signage could be anything. I mean, there would be basically absolutely 0 criteria from the city. It is really an abrogation of ULURP. So I think that it is really not desirable. And I will stop talking and I will listen to your comments. Who's next? Mike.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. The only thing is, my point of view, a casino, not in our district, but in the city would be a good thing. But in order for the casino to be successful, in my opinion, it needs a large campus for people to feel like it's a resort and not on top of Saks Fifth Avenue and something small and like a opium den or something like that. So it needs to be a large facility. So I want a successful casino, and I don't see how this proposal puts any guidelines on how large of a lot or if it's on a wide street or anything like that. So I think there's no planning to this proposal, so I wish there was more. That's all.
Yeah. Any other comments? We can also decide to just wrap this. Yeah, Jacob.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, I agree with, I don't have a philosophical problem with all casinos entirely either. But the fact that they can just be stuck anywhere, colored in on the map without, other parameters, as you were just saying, Leila, is kind of bizarre to me and indicates a lack of, forethought at this point for what we want them to look like in the city. Procedurally, the one other thing that struck me is the indication that according to the zoning text resolution, three of the 9 locations can be constructed right now as of right without major modification. And I do wonder whether that is kind of a perverse incentive for where the state will end up locating them to try and fast track them, to try and get around the need for major modification or environmental reviews. And if that's the way that the CACs in the state decide to go, 2 of them are ending up in our district.
Yeah. So, I think that we will have the opportunity to become involved with the CAC, not because we have a seat, we do not have a seat. But they will have to hold hearings. And so we will have an opportunity to comment and testify at those hearings. I think it is prudent for us at this particular juncture to take a well-rounded position. We did take a position last year in December. Now what is in front of us is a zoning tax amendment. I think we really need to say that we're very chagrined with the fact that there is no environmental review, that we really don't know what, the environmental impacts of these proposals in our district will have, so that when the CACs do have their hearings, we can actually go and testify, and we don't have to, sit and be like, oh, gee, but we're not really on record on that. So I think that now is really the time to, solidify and flesh out a position on that. The one thing that really also chagrins me is that we don't know what guidelines the CACs are going to follow. And one CAC may decide that, I don't know, like traffic congestion is super important, and another one may decide that they absolutely don't care. It's not their priority. So it is not going to be a unified review, which I think is also hugely problematic. Okay,
I just want to say that it's going to be a political decision, and the main criteria, I think, is that it generates money for the state. So that's why a large casino that would attract more people would generate more money, and not a small.
So you're correct, but actually this will be done by the Siting Commission. So the CAC can do whatever they want. They can say, you know what, we're really against casinos on moral grounds and we don't want them. And if they have a 2/3 majority, then that's the end of that. They don't have to justify their votes. But if they say yes, and if the zoning permits such use, then it moves to the Siting Commission, and the Siting Commission has criteria. And they have a whole ranking where you need to provide X number of jobs, you need to provide diversity, at the commission level, there's a whole set of criteria. At the CAC can do whatever they want. If they like casinos, they can vote yes. If they don't like casinos, they vote no, and they don't have to justify it, they don't have to explain it. They have to do it in a rigorous way. but they have absolute discretion.
Right, but they still want to make their budget work.
The CAC is not, like the CAC representatives are not, I mean, everybody wants to be fiscally, responsible, but they don't have an obligation.
Okay,
So even a casino that may appear to be, promised to more economic success, the CAC doesn't have to take that into account.
all right, but they still. When the state is invested in giving a license to an entity that will generate money for them.
Correct, but that is the commission's job.
Okay, but I mean, the commission is still run by the governor and it's still the
Yes,
same people.
But what I mean is that in the process, it doesn't get to the commission unless it has the blessing of 2/3 of the CAC and the zoning permits such use.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. All right,
It's a
maybe,
formality, it's a political formality in my point of view.
okay, got it. Yeah,
Yeah, it just seems to me the amendments end run around the land use, proper land use procedures. So I'm
Yes.
against it for that. I just want to point out that historically, the money that's supposed to be generated by casinos doesn't really end up where they say it's going to end up. And if you look at New York State Lottery, last year alone, we've had several billion-dollar lotteries. The money's supposed to go to education, but boy, teachers are still buying textbook for their kids. So we just know that the money, big casinos aren't great generators of wealth for their communities. Take 2-block walk away from the boardwalk in Atlantic City and see what a terrible, miserable place Atlantic City is. So I'm just against everything as usual. So
all right, I think we're ready to wrap this up. So we need a motion
motion to deny.
and we need a second.
Second.
Okay. All right, first vote of the evening.
Hey, Mike,
Yes,
Julie,
Yes.
EJ, yes. Mary,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Aaron is a yes. Leila,
Yes.
motion passes. We have 7-0-0-0.
Okay, thank you. And just, restating the fact that we do not have quorum. This vote will be presented really more like a survey to the Executive Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5, and the Executive Committee will be the body that will actually take the vote that will be presented to the full board. Thank you very much, Stephen and DCP for the presentation. And moving on to the next item, we're still with DCP. So I don't know if Stephen is staying with us. Maybe he's not. Maybe
I'm
he needs
not,
to go
thank
to-
you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays, Stephen. I think that Matt is in the house. So we
Hello.
are doing of a presentation of the City of Yas for economic opportunity zoning tax amendment. So for a little bit of context, this is actually the second time that Matt and Janelle come to us, and Ezra come from Department of City Planning, come to Community Board 5 to give us a presentation on this extremely dense and robust zoning tax amendment. 18 different proposals, actually not all of them applicable to CB5, but a lot of them are, so that we can better understand and educate ourselves on this proposal, and we can make an informed recommendation. We expect this vote to be taken in very early 2024, so we are not voting or even polling or surveying this group tonight. So the quorum issue does not impact the review of this particular item. So Matt, thank you so much for being with us again tonight. It would be great if you can give us refresher of the presentation, and then we can dig deeper. I know that we had a lot of questions also on the manufacturing districts that affect CD5 quite extensively.
That sounds good. And thank you, Chair, and members of the community board for having me back. I'm glad to be back. I can't believe it's already been a month. Time flies. Joe Neal, up to you. Whether you want to give a presentation, I'm also happy to provide an overview, whatever your preference is.
I didn't prepare a specific presentation for tonight, so wanted to.
Okay. I can't hear you, but I did hear the words, I didn't prepare a specific presentation. So I am happy to provide an overview. And in fact, I just had one up, but you'll have to forgive me that this presentation is tailored actually to respond to a business improvement district in Brooklyn. So I'm going to skip over some slides that don't pertain to you all.
Terrific, thank you.
No problem. Okay. And I'll keep it short, about 10 minutes, so we can really use our time as Q&A.
Great.
Okay. All right. Confirming you all can see my screen, and I'll make it full screen in a second.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So ignoring the Grand Street bid part of this, City of Yes, just as a refresher, 3 different citywide text amendments from 3 separate perspectives, all focused on modernizing our city zoning resolution. The first of these, City of Yes for carbon neutrality, was adopted by the City Council last week, or it might have been 2 weeks ago now. The second of these we're discussing this evening, economic opportunity, and the third, housing opportunity, will enter into the formal public review in the spring. But zoning, when it comes to small businesses, for the most part, has not been updated since 1961. So we've created all sorts of new contextual residential districts, commercial districts. We've done a lot of updates to different parts of our zoning. But when it comes to business regulation, for the most part, we're still stuck with 1961 version of what planners thought made sense at the time. So you have zoning that's full of things like taxidermy and typewriter repair. You have a 61 zoning resolution that basically outlawed the creation of new loft-like industrial buildings. You have a zoning resolution that pretty much was silent on the idea of urban design and streetscape. And you have a zoning resolution that predated modern environmental regulation. And so there's a number of different ways in which that sort of framework of Midtown is where people work. That's not where people live. And that's certainly, there's some production, but most production occurs in industrial areas. That sort of framework, it wasn't true in 1961, but the zoning tried to make it so. And over the last 6 decades, we've realized a number of different ways, particularly coming out of the pandemic, that that sort of framework, that mid-20th century idea of what zoning is, really just doesn't work in today's modern economy, and it especially didn't work for many small businesses in 2020 and onward. So to back up and talk a little bit about process, because I don't think we touched on this much last time, a lot of our learnings for what informed this text amendment came out of the pandemic. And we saw almost overnight many businesses having to adapt either their business operations, go to online, people having to shift to work from home, just a really tremendous shock and disruption to our city's economy and really to our way of life and to our health. But there were some silver linings to be said coming out of that crisis. Things like all 5 chambers of commerce coming together. They formed a small business resource network where they had specialists who were helping small businesses really navigate complicated rules. It's not just zoning, but all of the different intersecting city, state, and federal regulations that just make it really hard to start operating, run a business in New York City. So we started talking to these specialists a lot about what they were seeing, where zoning might be getting in the way of this work. We expanded a lot of our engagement and outreach to business improvement districts, to industrial service providers, to organizations whose day in, day out job is helping small businesses locate and grow, fill empty storefront space, fill empty office space. And we continue to grow. And we had 5 public information sessions with community board members across the city, trying to iterate these proposals, really understand things that might be good for business, but might have a quality of life concern. So trying to strike a balance between those two. And over the last 2 years now, really, we've had developed a lot of questions where zoning was getting in the way. Things like, I have a bakery, I'd like to expand it and start selling to local restaurants, but I can't do that because the zoning says I can't have more than 750 square feet of production space. Or I have a bar and I can have live music today, but what if I want to have a comedy night? The zoning says no in many locations to having comedy in the same space that you can have live music. So it's through this process that we identified a lot of zoning barriers, particularly for small businesses. And just to sort of emphasize, the status quo benefits people with the means financially to hire land use attorneys, architects, and other expediters to understand very convoluted rules, to exploit loopholes, and to really understand ways to make the system work for them. What this means for your everyday small business is it's just impossibly hard to navigate. So our goal for this work is zoning that's more simple, more adaptable, and more modern, so that we can level the playing field for, in particular, small businesses, so they can fill the storefront space. We're not trying to put land use attorneys out of a job. I'm sure they will still find plenty of work, but the goal here is to really democratize our zoning in a very straightforward way and make it more simple for folks to understand. So again, 4 main goals for the work. First, we want to make it easier for businesses to find space and grow. So this is all the ways in which our zoning is making it hard, in particular, to fill storefront space and to fill office space. We know there are 17,000 vacant storefronts across the city. I think we shared last time the vacancy rate in Manhattan CB5 being quite high. And we also know that there are tens of millions of square feet of empty office space. And we know that those challenges aren't going away. And so part of our solution as a city to these twin challenges of storefront space and office space is removing some of these zoning barriers, of preventing some business types from being able to locate in those spaces. For example, mini golf on the 10th floor of an office block. No reason that we can find why that shouldn't be allowed. Goal 2, we want to boost growing industry types. These are emerging businesses where zoning has found some sort of confusion or ambiguity that we want to clarify and reduce obstacles for. There are many kinds of emerging businesses across our city, but these are ones in which zoning is getting in the way. Goal 3 is about streetscape regulation. So we know that business activity isn't just that economic vibrancy isn't just about what happens in a business, it's how that business interacts with its surroundings. And for better or for worse, what a business chooses to do in its operations can affect neighboring businesses, can affect residents, can affect quality of life. And so these 3 proposals in goal 3 are focused on that intersection between where the zoning lot ends and the public right-of-way begins. And then goal 4 is all about new kinds of tools to our zoning. So these are the BSA and CPC waiver processes and the zoning districts themselves. And as we're looking at all of the ways in which our zoning that's as of right is out of date, we also recognize that the zoning toolkit for waivers and modifications to the as of right zoning also is in sore need of updating, and in particularly when it comes to our M districts. So we can get into more details on that. So as a recap, there are 18 separate proposals. I'm happy to go into them, but I also can just leave that for the Q&A. And we'll also just say that we have an awful lot of resources on our website, nyc.gov/yes economic opportunity, and I'll provide some links during the Q&A based on particular questions. But again, goal 1, we have 6 different proposals. They're all focused on making it easier to fill empty space, whether that's on the ground floor or above the ground floor. Goal 2 is about emerging business types and providing clarity where there's currently ambiguity, or lifting restrictions where there are currently restrictions on emerging types of business activity. Goal 3 is about streetscape regulations and making sure that we're enabling more safe, active, and walkable streets. And then goal 4 is all kinds of new tools that would require public review would all go before the community board, but provide businesses the ability to adapt over time to changing circumstances. And so they're all processes that are not as of right, that we're updating our zoning toolkit. And that's not relevant to you all because that's in Brooklyn. So I'll stop sharing my slides now. Oh, actually, a couple more things. Timeline. So I understand that we're not planning on a vote tonight, and that will occur sometime in January, but happy to talk more about timeline. We are anticipating a public hearing early next year with a city planning commission vote happening roughly a month to a month and a half later, depending on our timing. It's always a question with text amendments exactly when that vote is, but that's why we're advising community boards to get their votes in no later than the first week in February. So say like the 8th, the 9th of February kind of being that really that deadline. And as I mentioned, all the resources that we have on our website that sort of go beyond this overview. So looking at storefront vacancy across every community district, jobs, and storefront by the type of business, details on each of the 18 proposals, annotated zoning text. So the 1,127 pages, which very few pages of that are actually relevant to the changes we're making, but highlighted there. And then each of the current uses that we have translated them to what's being proposed. And we also have a document that takes the proposed uses and translates them back to what they look like under current uses. So I know one of the questions that I want to make sure we answer tonight came up around what is an amusement and could that include thrill rides? And so I do have an answer on that, and I want to be able to share that in the Q&A. And then this is an optional checklist that some community boards have found really helpful and just giving us a rubric for more detailed modifications. It's a big proposal. We don't expect every community board to like all 18. We'd be thrilled if you did, but we expect at least modifications on some of them that you would request. And so this worksheet, which is on our website, but also you all should have, gives you that sort of rubric and can be uploaded as an attachment to the land use portal in your resolution. So with that, I'll stop there. I've got a lot more that I can go into, but just glad to be back. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. It's really good to have you. I think it is going to be very useful for us to go to the proposal 18, because I think this is a brand new zoning and it could affect our district pretty extensively. Tell us exactly what this proposal would do. Why does it not exist currently, and what would change under that? And is it correct that this one is actually separate from the rest?
Yeah. So I'll start by answering that part. So City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, 18 proposals, but 2 land use actions within those 18 proposals. So proposals 1 through 17 are associated with 1 land use action, and proposal 18 is associated with a separate land use action. And the candid reason for that is that as we had to make a decision on going forward into the public review, perhaps more so outside of Manhattan, but the creation of new kinds of industrial zoning designations, or M districts, is intensely political, and is also there are varying opinions on what these districts should be. There's a lot of details, and so we've been working very closely with industrial service providers, particularly in Brooklyn and Queens, but also in Staten Island and the Bronx a little bit as well. So they're kind of bids for industrial areas, and trying to make sure that we get these tools right, that they're applicable and useful in a citywide context, but also address a lot of the concern we hear, particularly in places like North Brooklyn, where there is concern about existing industrial businesses getting priced out by non-industrial uses typically allowed in M districts. So these being eating and drinking establishments, nightclubs, things of that nature. And so to be responsive in part to that concern, we created new kinds of zoning districts that for the first time do restrict non-industrial uses within an M district. And because the creation of these new districts is still subject to a lot of council negotiations, subject to a lot of conversations we were having. We weren't entirely 100% sure that we could get to a consensus on these new districts on the same timeline as economic opportunity. And so that's why we made the decision to split them. But
Got it.
go forward a few months in the future, we feel pretty good now that we're approaching that consensus, and that we don't think that need currently exists. And so we're considering them together. We'd ask that you consider them together. What we would ask, because some other boards have gotten confused about this, is when you have a resolution and when the full board votes, vote on all 18, just vote on them together and upload the same documentation to both, because it can get confusing. And so just like whenever there's a neighborhood study and there's a mapping action, there's multiple actions, it's the same principle, but it gave us more flexibility in the onset not to hold back the other 17 in the event that the creation of new kinds of zoning districts was, for whatever reason, on a different timeline. So that's
Got
to
it.
address
Okay.
that question.
Okay.
So into the
So
substance
what
then.
is in the text and how is it going to affect us?
Yeah. I am seeing 2 slides that I want to share, but I need to find another one that I think will be very helpful. So just bear with me a second.
Are we looking for the applicability maps?
No, I was looking for the bulk. It's an appendix slide, but I was looking for bulk on the new M districts. Oh, I got it. Okay. All right, so again, gonna share my screen. And I'm gonna keep this in the, well, actually I could probably full screen it. Okay. So generally, in 1961, we had loft-like buildings across the city, especially in CB5, and our zoning, for the most part, in 1961 made these obsolete. So whether it's the yard requirements, the setback requirements that rely on a sky exposure plane, the idea, at least of planners of the time, was that in the future, manufacturing in places like Midtown was going away, and that the future manufacturing would be in the suburbs, in sort of these low-slung, one-story warehouse type facilities that people would drive to. And quite honestly, you can look back into the reports that preceded the 61 zoning resolution and see that pretty clearly, how people thought about the future of manufacturing. And they were right in the sense that manufacturing was going to leave urban centers, but they were wrong with where it was going, and they didn't anticipate globalization. And so you saw what they thought would go to Long Island really just go to the American South or go overseas. But as a result, we had loft-like buildings that you couldn't build a version of what you see on the right-hand side of this photo new in most parts of the city. And so, not to mention, because of that sort of drive to suburban mentality of production in the future, most M districts have really high parking and loading requirements. That makes it really impossible to build new forms of these buildings. So it's the height and setback, it's the yard requirements, and it's also the parking in particular. Now, the parking doesn't apply to CB5, but just for the citywide context. So our proposal is to create 4 new kinds of zoning districts that all have a more loft-like envelope, and all, to varying degrees, are applicable in different geographies. Now, I'll note that not all 4 of these districts may be applicable in CB5, and these are tools that are not going to be mapped as part of this initiative. So they're added to the zoning resolution. They could be used in the future by the agency. They could also be used in the future by private applicants, but they all address ways in which our current M districts are obsolete. And we're also creating a new type of commercial district that I'll also note. So going from left to right, there is the M3A. It's a core industrial district. Core meaning it is meant for areas where there's access to maritime and freight rail. We believe that this is the place where we don't want to see transformation. So it is, like I mentioned earlier, the first time that the agency is creating a type of zoning district that restricts the FAR of non-industrial uses, but it also gives a slight increase in the FAR for industrial uses. So, for example, today, M1 uses, you go from 2 FAR to 5 FAR, and there's no 3 or 4 option. Similarly, you go from 5 to 10 with nothing in between, and there are currently no M districts that go above 10 FAR. And so the core district would be available at a few designations in that sort of lower range. The transition district is a new type of tool. It's technically an M2 district. It's designed to incentivize creation of new industrial space that has both room for industrial users, but also allows for commercial uses that can be used to cross-subsidize the creation of new space. So the idea that on its own, most manufacturing industrial uses really just don't pencil out for new construction today, and we know that. We have spent a lot of time researching how other cities are solving these similar challenges, and it is very, very hard to see new construction standalone industrial space in the city. We know that. And so we are trying to put our thumbs on the scale here and say, we are creating an as-of-right tool that incentivizes the creation of new industrial space. The closest comparison to the transition district is what we see in Gowanus currently, but this is an even more higher differential in the floor area allowed between industrial and non-industrial. The growth, which is a version of the M1 district, but it has better bulk essentially, so that it's lower yard requirements, a higher height and setback, and notably for places that are outside of Manhattan core, no parking. So that is also particularly of use for places near transit, and does not have any differentiation between industrial and non-industrial uses. It's just like an M1 today, but with better bulk, more loft-like envelopes that are currently not allowed to be built. C7 district is the same bulk as the growth. So we're borrowing the exact same bulk regulations, but it is the same use rules as a C6. So the C7, you'll note today, it appears in 3 places exactly on our zoning map: Coney Island, another place in Brooklyn, and then a place in the Bronx. It was originally meant for amusement park uses, but if you go back to 61, they actually permitted all use groups, inclusive of use group 17. And then in the 70s, there were some changes made in Coney Island to put in a special district and restrict that. But we looked to other cities across the country, and they all seem to have some sort of what they call an innovation district, where you allow for a range of things like life sciences and other high-tech industries with a loft-like envelope that these kinds of industries want. But zoning in New York City didn't have this kind of a tool. So this is the first time we're creating a tool like that is a type of commercial district, but it does not have the same bulk restrictions that a C6 does, for example. So speaking of bulk, since I invoked it a few times, this is even more detail on what the...
I'm good.
Mhm.
Matt, I'm going to just add a quick question. Do we have any C7 districts in CB5? We do.
You
No,
don't.
we don't.
You
No, we
do
don't.
not. There are no C7 districts in Manhattan right now. There are only
Okay.
3 places in the city where we've mapped one. And what we're essentially doing as part of economic opportunity is repurposing the C7 designation to create a new type of zoning district that we see in comparative cities. For example, Seattle has one of these kinds of districts. You see it along the waterfront, and it allows a loft-like envelope, and it allows a wide range of commercial and light industrial uses. But New York City doesn't have that, and so it's a new type of tool that admittedly is untested, but it's one that we feel that is an important one to add to the zoning toolkit, because it provides that sort of that flexible envelope that innovative industries tend to want, and usually they'll opt for an M1 instead.
Okay, and are you foreseeing that there would be a rezoning in CB5 where you would rezone to a C7?
I'll turn things over to Ezra on that question, since I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, and maybe we can save this question for the question period. I'm actually getting a little bit out of order on our own process.
Oh, no,
so
no problem.
Sorry.
I mean, with a private application, perhaps, is my short answer.
Got it. Okay.
And so you could see a C6 go to a C7 because they like the bulk. It'd be the same uses. It'd be for a better, more loft-like bulk that they would want it.
Got it. Okay.
But speaking of bulk, this is very in the weeds, but hopefully useful. So just to orient yourself to this table, on the far left side is the suffix of each zoning district. So for example, an M1A1 is 2 FAR. So this is the first row here. So an M1A1 is 2 FAR. An M1A9 would be up to 15 FAR. And so that's the range. And so then you have the FAR associated with manufacturing uses, commercial uses, and community facility uses, notably without sleeping accommodation. Same thing for in the transition district, where there is a low to medium range of density allowed, and then the core district is only for low density situations. And so the M1A and the C7 have the same bulk envelope.
And just to clarify, is this cumulative, meaning that, you know, if you're a developer, can you do a building that would have a 15 manufacturing and then an additional 15 commercial and then an additional 15 community facility?
No. So it is up to 15 of that combination of uses. So you could do, correct, blended. So you could do up to 15 of a combination of those three.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe we could not go over 15 even if there was a you do see buildings with up to 45 FAR that I'm aware of, but they're non-conforming.
Okay. Okay, great. That is very helpful. Any more that you want to share with us on this particular proposal, or should we go to questions?
I would note that the M1A growth district is able to be paired with residential districts. So to form an MX pairing, the C7 district is actually not able to be paired with residential. And that was an intentional choice made because there are some circumstances where you want to ensure that the building is fully commercial or light industrial and has that sort of flexibility. So both tools do exist, but the M1A growth is the one that can be paired with residential, just like an M1 could be paired with residential today.
And the FAR for residential would be your usual 10 bump to 12 with affordable.
Actually, what we've done for this proposal for the M1A growth is that whatever pairing, you can take the higher bulk, essentially. So in a typical, and Ezra, you might be able to comment better than I can on this. Yeah.
That's with regards to envelope, but when it comes to FAR, you're correct. It's the same, that it would be, 10 or 12. Like you can't go above 12 because of the,
Because of the state cap. So if you are in a M1A9, you can do a 10 FAR residential and then 5 community facility. And that would bring you to 15.
Or any combination of 10 residential and 5 of, you could do 2 manufacturing, 2 commercial, and 1 community facility, or whatever combination you'd like.
Okay. So got it. Okay. That's helpful. And would there be any M1A districts in CB5? And in order for that to happen, does it mean that there would be a rezoning?
Correct. So none of these districts are as of right, and all of the M1 designations that currently exist would stay as they are. Any change to these new districts would require a full ULURP.
Okay. But those would be applicable to our M16 and M15 existing districts.
I believe the existing districts would stay as they are. These are tools to be mapped in the future. So nothing is going to change with existing M15s and 6s. This is, only to be implemented via subsequent rezoning actions, like zoning map amendments.
That's right.
But my question is, in order to rezone, do you have to start from a certain zoning district to this?
Oh, okay.
Or could you be like a C64A and then you're becoming a M1A9? Could you do that?
You could theoretically, although it's admittedly much harder. So you would have to look at, as part of the environmental review, the full reasonable worst case of M1 uses. Whereas if you're going from the current M1 to an M1A, let's say, the environmental review has to look at less because effectively the same uses are allowed tomorrow as they would be today. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't, because
Okay.
if I'm if I'm a developer and you know, I have a plot of land, what makes the value of my land is actually the FAR. So if all of a sudden you're dangling a 15 FAR and that I can put in this 15 FAR pretty much anything I want, including you know, up to 12 residential, I'm going to jump through hoops and make it happen.
And again,
So-
just noting that, well, that is like correct. The M19A would not allow the residential. You have to do a pairing, and then that kind of creates its own like miniature set of regulations that govern like a split, the way we have like M16/R10 provisions that are like kind of distinct from what a R10 is by itself and what a M16 is by itself.
I'm actually not aware of any C
wait,
district to M district rezonings, like, at all.
Not yet, because you have not created the tool, but this tool, you will be flooded if you think that you don't have the bandwidth to do 9 casinos. Wait till this one goes through. Everybody is going to want it.
We don't believe that to be the case. In part
Okay,
because
so-
there are many other avenues available to people that might want. So there are bulk waivers you could obtain in C districts. You could rezone to higher residential. You could rezone to a higher C district.
So in a C64A, you can get a bulk, it's not even a bulk waiver, it's a density waiver.
Right.
Can you get a density waiver in a C64A? I don't think so.
Sorry, I don't quite understand by the density waiver piece.
I guess my
Well-
understanding of the sure. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's my question. I don't think it exists.
Yeah,
I don't
mean,
think there's a waiver where you can, you know, like, bring a district that has a 10 FAR to a 15 FAR in a C district.
Standalone without like a special district provisions. Yeah, I believe that that's the case. I'm not as familiar with like non-special Midtown or like lower Manhattan district commercial regs off the bat to say it definitively, but and we also, your point is taken about, you know, it's potentially being like a shortcut for a developer who wants to maybe be outside of like special Midtown district and get up to 15 FAR, which is a very typical max density in the special Midtown district. But that's why I guess every rezoning action that could allow for that, you know, could allow for potentially somebody changing from a C district to one of these M1 growth districts. It would have to go through full ULURP, and, you know, there'd be the element of discretionary review. And I mean, I'd like to think that if we, you know, there was somehow a gold rush that materialized in that sense, you know, if people seeing it as an opportunity to get, you know, a quick upzoning, that, you know, that could be taken into account too, because the intent here really is to facilitate, you know, new typologies and new kind of density varieties for like manufacturing uses that can allow for like, you know, appropriate commercial and community facility uses.
Okay. Thank you. Let's open up to other questions, and if it's okay with you, we can also go into questions on the proposals from 1 to 17.
Sure.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? I know that it is, you know, once again, a very, very dense set of proposals that are in front of us. EJ.
I had a couple questions last time about the efforts to revitalize vacant storefronts. I know that proposal one is lifting time limits, which is, you know, supposed to be one incentive. Presumably along with other simplification slash, you know, liberalization of, you know, potential uses of those storefronts to get economic activity in there. I guess I'm curious whether you have like an estimation of how much that proposal or the proposals combined are gonna have an effect on
Mhm.
what seems to be a pretty consistent 17 to 19% vacancy rate in community board districts at this point. Do you have any sense of, you know, what the impact of these proposals would be in terms of energizing those vacant storefronts?
Right. I think any number I could give you would be frankly not, it would be at best a rough estimate. And believe me, we've tried. So I'll describe this in more qualitative ways, which is that we know in speaking with brokers of office space, I was at the Garment District Alliance, they had a broker roundtable the other week, and you heard broker after broker say, we need to help fill storefront space and handle a lot of the quality of life issues that were raised, and the PD was there, and we talked a lot about methadone clinics and things like that to help fill the office space. And we know that the relationship between the empty office space and the empty storefront space, particularly in Midtown, is causal. Like and they sort of beget one another, that the more empty office space you have, the more storefront space you have that's empty, and vice versa. And so I won't sugarcoat that we know there is a crisis of empty office space in Midtown, and that directly impacts the city's budget and its ability to provide services that then exacerbate the quality of life issues. So we know we need to get a handle on both the empty office space and the empty storefront space together. Because we know that the knock-on effects, particularly in the out years, if you look at the city's budget projections, are not good. And so going back to these proposals, we're doing everything that we can to address the ways that zoning implicates making it harder to fill both empty office space and empty storefront space. So you mentioned proposal one, and kind of ironically, we start off with that one where we're talking about storefronts that are considered non-conforming in residential areas. I don't actually believe there's any R districts mapped in CB5, or if there are, they're very limited.
We
Yeah,
have a
there
couple
are
R10s
two,
and
You have a few.
two
Okay.
very, very small. Yeah.
Okay, so in those places, proposal one applies and would remove that 2-year time clock on non-conforming storefront space. But it's really proposals, and I can actually, it might be helpful for me to bring this up and sort of animate the talking of it. But the majority of the proposals are designed to fill that empty space in various ways. So proposal two, wide range of business types that are allowed in C6 as of right, not allowed in C4 and C5. We think because these districts are effectively the same, they're located in the same places, we should allow the same mix of businesses. And the effect of that simplification is to just make it more clear if you're a broker, if you are a tenant seeking space or a prospective tenant seeking space, just
Matt,
what you can do.
you actually Matt, can you give us an example of how that would apply? Does it mean that,
Yeah.
you know, if you're a restaurant, you can also be a bakery? Is that the kind of idea?
Yeah, I think I'll reply by mentioning. So C6 districts, the third column here, they allow for a wide range of use types, but your C5 districts do not allow for a lot of the same range of uses. So these are things like current use group 8, experiential retail and amusement places of assembly, notably theaters, not allowed in C5, even though they're allowed in C6. A lot of personal care and repair services not allowed in C5. So a lot of the kinds of businesses that might be allowed and appropriate for ground floor space. And what we heard from the Garment Center was, or Garment District Alliance, is that the more you turn Midtown into sort of a 24/7 space, the more you need those ground floor services that aren't just food and beverage or grocery. And so a lot of what's currently allowed in C6, not allowed in C5. And then I would also note in some of the C4 districts, no kind of custom manufacturing. So this is what proposal 2 addresses. It collapses the distinctions between C5 and C6 in particular. But proposal 3, actually, this is also relevant. In C5 districts, There are uses that are allowed, but they're only allowed above the ground floor. Dance studios, instructional facilities, clothing rental shops being three prominent examples. You can have them on the second floor, you can have them on the 10th floor, you can't have them on the ground floor.
So you could have your yoga studio on the second floor, but you cannot have it on the ground floor.
In the storefront space itself, precisely.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas in a C1 or C2 overlay, I live in Brooklyn, I walk past a studio on my way to the subway. If it's okay in Brooklyn, it should be okay in CB5. And this is, again, these are the ways that zoning just inhibits that vacancy. I think it was 990 vacant storefronts in CB5, if I recall. It's nearly 1,000 storefronts out of the city's 17,000. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Proposal 3 is another way that we're directly addressing empty storefront space. So these are the kinds of, today might be called custom manufacturing, but that definition exclude things like coffee roasters, ice cream parlors, microbreweries. It also excludes types of uses that were not in existence 60 years ago, like 3D printing. And something like 3D printing, perfectly appropriate to locate on upper floors, but because it wasn't around 60 years ago, not defined, not allowed. So these are also kinds of business types that we're defining, subjecting to environmental rules before they're allowed to locate, but we think should be allowed to locate in storefronts and in office space. Proposal 4, yeah. So you can kind of see how going through, I don't have a like, we can't say we're going to reduce vacancy by 50%. I don't want to give you a number that's not real, but I will say that each of these proposals are crafted for a specific way that the zoning makes it hard to fill space.
Yeah. On proposal 5, I think we had quite a bit of a discussion on that, where basically you could have a mixed use building, but now the mixed use can be in different parts of the building, whereas currently the zoning only allows for the commercial use to be on the lower floor.
Yeah.
Is that seems to be something that, you know, it could have a lot of negative consequences and quality of life consequences in these buildings.
It could, but we looked at this a lot to minimize the potential that that would occur. So just to give you some details on this, what we're proposing is already allowed in many places in Midtown, such as the east side of Midtown. We've had these proposals in place for several years now, but in other places they're not allowed as of right, but there's a permit, a process to go through it. But essentially what these processes do is you are required to have separation. So whether that's on the ground floor, you need separate entrances between the commercial and non-commercial parts of a building. If the building requires elevator access, then you need separate elevators between the residential and the non-residential parts of the building. And so that separation is required. In addition, what we built into the proposal is prior to getting that certificate of occupancy, you need to either completely separate by at least 15 feet, or you have to have a sound engineer certify that your noise potential is attenuated, that you have soundproofing that mitigates the noise. And if you want to do some production that requires venting, you have to do that venting to the exterior. So those are the things that we built into the zoning prior to that C of O. But I will say the main use case that we see this being potentially useful is when it comes to something called the stacking rules. So in our zoning today, stacking rules prohibit you to have, like on the left side diagram here, you can have commercial and then you can have residential in the same building, but you can only have residential above commercial. So you cannot have a commercial use locate above residences. And what we are proposing is to do away with that stacking rule so that you can have the sort of flexibility that you see here. And we think that's really important for partial conversions of office buildings to another kind of use. There's a whole bunch of things coming in City of Yes for housing opportunity that will address the other ways that zoning gets it in the way of converting office to residential. But one of these is the stacking rules, where you couldn't say take one elevator bank and convert it to one use and then have another elevator bank of the building converted to a separate use. And so this proposal would allow for that flexibility, but doesn't in and of itself create new housing. we need to have another text amendment that does that in the future. But what this one does is unlocks greater flexibility within the building, particularly new construction, but where we see the use case in the future is around something like partial conversions to other kinds of commercial or light industrial activities.
Okay.
But this one's really
right.
complicated, so I'm happy to spend more time on it.
Everything is complicated, Matt.
I've been doing this for 2 years, and there are some
You
details that
guys
sometimes
have been busy. It's really astounding. Other questions? Yeah, Mike.
On proposal 9, is it, am I still reading it correctly that there's a 250 person occupancy or seating maximum for as of right conversion for live entertainment?
it'd be 200 people, but the idea is correct. So today you can have live music up to 200 people anywhere in a bar or restaurant. What the proposal does is it says where you can have live music, you can also have comedy, you can also have open mic nights, and people can dance to that music. So that's what would apply in any district. And then if you're in a C4 or a C5 or a C6 district, there would be no 200 person capacity limitation, but there would be lobby requirements. So the queuing has to be occurring within the building, and there would be distancing requirements from a mapped a mapped R district.
But currently there is a capacity limitation.
In C6 districts, there's not. So this is another complicated slide, but if you look at, this is the bottom row here of use group 12A. You can see that in C4 districts and in C6 districts, but only C6 1 to 4. What these dots mean is that you have lobby requirements and you have distancing requirements. But if you satisfy both of those rules, you're allowed as of right to have eating and drinking with dancing today. And then there is no lobby requirement in the C6 5 through 9. Notably, C5 does not have this. So the main change that you would see in CB5 from Proposal 9 is adopting the regulations from your C4 and C6 districts into the C5s. So if you're a C5 1 to 4, you would have the lobby requirements. If you're a C5 5 to 9, you would not have the lobby requirements. Does that make sense?
And if you're a C6, you would have the lobby requirement.
Some
No.
C6s have them today. We're keeping those in place. Some C6s do not have them today, and we're not making any changes.
Got
So
it.
essentially,
Okay.
C6 has no change compared to what's
Has
allowed
no
today.
change.
C5 is where you would see the change, and C4 is where you would see some change depending on the C4. In
Okay.
M districts also no change because you can have unlimited size dancing.
Yeah. Okay, and are you working on this in conjunction with the City of Yes for housing opportunity?
With regard to what? I'm curious.
So, we are going to, and we expect through, rezonings of Midtown South and, just the citywide zoning tax amendment on housing, that housing is going to be permitted much more broadly. And, the whole idea of planning and zoning is actually that you want to make sure that your uses don't conflict with each other. So, if you can allow a very, very large nightclub, it's fine, provided that you're not making the life of your neighbors miserable. And this is where we rely on the Department of State Planning to make sure that, things are sited in proper locations.
Yep.
And given that, all of a sudden you are allowing for uses that have a negative impact to be, much more prevalent in the city, and you're also allowing residential to be much more prevalent, these uses are going to end up having conflicts. And what you may end up doing inadvertently is that you're going to create residential neighborhoods that will, from the onset, have a very poor quality of life. And,
I
so
understand, yeah.
I'm just wondering if, it's a very complicated equation. But, I'm just wondering if, by allowing these changes that, support, economic growth, and it's great, you're not creating, life conditions for residents of Midtown South that are going to be really deteriorated.
Yeah, I totally understand your concerns here, and we share your concerns because we want to be able to make sure that there is that balance of, as you describe, economic activity, but without negatively impacting quality of life. So on this proposal in particular, we've been working very, very closely with a host of different city agencies, most notably the Office of Nightlife, which for several years now has been the city's ombudsman, trying to connect nightlife businesses with various resources, but also in mediating where conflicts do arise between bars, restaurants, nightclubs, other nightlife venues, and residents. And so we were working with them very closely in making sure that what we are doing is not only reasonable, but in the absence of zoning rules, particularly on the topic of dancing, that a host of other city rules sort of fall into place. So as it relates to your question on Midtown, though, I'll note C6 districts allow residences today, C4 districts do as well. And so it is both the case that in these districts today, you can have, as of right, residential directly above a nightclub of unlimited size. That's part of living in New York City anywhere, is that you do have this sort of cheek to jowl nature of different uses. But what we're making sure is that if we are going to expand the same things into C5s that we have in C6, that when that is occurring, the regulatory system works, or at least there are numerous levels to it. So particularly
the one thing I will say, Matt, sorry to interrupt, is that
no, please.
Our legal license committee of Community Board 5 basically deals with seeing these poor neighbors who are struggling with very poor quality of life for that very reason. And for full disclosure, I am among those. I live in the recently rezoned, it was like 10 or 15 years ago, Ladies Mile District, where residential became permitted, and I was promised the fantastic quality of life. And I live around the corner from the Limelight, and I haven't slept properly for 22 years. That's probably why I'm so cranky. And it's not good. It is just not good. We see those neighbors who come, month after month after month, and they testify in front of our board, crying their eyeballs eyes because the kids are not sleeping, because they're being awakened, because their street is littered with all sorts of bodily fluids and other trash. And, this is, once again, it's like striking the correct balance and taking into account the needs of a residential population that, we need to continue to grow because we have a housing crisis. So, just being mindful of this conflict that, does exist, and brushing it aside as well, it's just living in New York, I don't think is doing justice to those of us who live in New York and deserve quality of life.
Yeah, that's very fair. And I agree that it shouldn't be brushed aside. And this is one of the more difficult parts of the proposal for us to find that right balance, precisely because of what you're describing. But we do feel very strongly that zoning should not regulate the bodily act of dancing. It has for decades, and it has done so in a discriminatory way. And we do not have a current city administration that uses that. But it's not too far in the distant past where you did have a city administration that did use the prohibition on the act of dancing to shut down bars, to arrest people, to fine venues. And it is totally possible that with this on the books, you could see that again. And so we believe, as a matter of free expression, as a matter of just fundamental equity, that we ought to do away with the regulation of dancing within zoning. Our approach that we've we think we've carefully gotten to, but still want suggestions and feedback on, is treating live music the same as live music with dancing, is treating live music the same as comedy, and saying that what zoning should regulate is the size of the venue, and that the potential for impacts that are not within the building itself. We need to work very closely with other city agencies on making sure that enforcement works. And so there are times when that enforcement is not working. And so that's what we want to address, and that's what we want to focus on. And I do welcome your suggestions on that sort of broader constellation, as well as the zoning proposal, because this is admittedly a place where zoning can only do so much. And we know that a lot of what we hear around nightlife businesses isn't actually related to the zoning itself, but rather the places where zoning ends and another agency's jurisdiction begins.
Yeah, no, totally. And your point is very well taken. And I think that, that this board is very much in alignment with the stated goal of the text. Absolutely. Okay, any other questions? Once again, we're not voting on this. We're gonna have time to get another pass. I think that your office has been really wonderful and supportive of our effort to educate ourselves on this text. So maybe what we can do is we can end that here. I will just open up to members of the public. Do we have any questions or comments from members of the public? Any questions or comments? Okay, so seeing none, let's agree that we are going to start to compile our questions, and we will send those to you and Janelle and Ezra. And then we can, continue to communicate, and I'm anticipating that probably in January, we will take this to a vote.
Okay. Chair, if I may, just your clarity on the timeline in January for either a committee vote or a full board vote.
I don't want to give you inaccurate information, so let's take this as a totally tentative date.
Okay.
But we are hoping to vote at committee in January and at full board in early February.
Okay. And so February, I believe that's usually the first week or so. I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, and we'll be in touch about this to make sure that this is
Okay.
able to be voted on and gets in on time. Like,
all right.
Again, we're very adamant that we want to make space for the community boards to take as much time and, have their voice heard and their vote count.
Yeah, and we
absolutely.
really appreciate that. And, I have to say, and, I want to repeat it. You have been so incredibly supportive of our effort to understand the text. We really appreciate all the work that you do for Community Board 5, and we don't take it for granted. We really value every bit of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have to say, I'm at a different community board every night, and I personally really appreciate that, because so often what you said goes unsaid. And so thank you.
Yeah, no, it is really, we love all the work that you guys are doing to support us, and so much appreciation.
Thank you all, and happy and healthy holiday season to you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you so much. Okay, so members of the committee, those were the two items where we had applicants. We have two more items on the agenda. We do not have applicants for these two items. One is an item for discussion. We may decide to take a vote, but definitely we need to start discussing this particular item. So to frame what is in front of us, as you all know, the GVP for the Penn area was introduced by the state in 2020. as part of it, it would, it has been adopted by ESD directors. Some other approval steps must be taken for any project to actually be considered for development and construction, but certainly, a big regulatory framework and zoning framework has been approved by ESD directors, and that was in 2022. Subsequently, the site of Hotel Pennsylvania is now vacant. The building that had been constructed in 1919 was demolished, raised almost to the ground. If you look at the side of it, it's actually quite interesting because the immediate perimeter towards the lot line is raised to the ground, but then as you get more within the footprint of the site, you can see that they have left another 2 feet of a structure that sticks up. The reason for that, we were explained, is that there is a whole bunch of rail infrastructure that is underneath, and that basically they can't shave it to the ground. They can't make it flat. They need to have this little platform that basically covers the rail infrastructure that is underneath. We've had opportunities through a variety of meetings and interactions to actually engage with Vornado. And we've asked them if they have any plans in the foreseeable future for this particular site. Vornado was invited to attend this meeting. They felt that it was premature to attend, and at the moment, according to them, they are not ready to really share any steps that they may take for the vacant site. According to Vornado chairman, in the last call with the investors, and as part of the SEC regulatory process, the chairman was asked the question by an analyst, and responded that they had a variety of plans that they were considering, including the potential to organize catwalks, fashion shows. I'm just quoting the chairman. So what we know really is that, as of now, we have a vacant site. This vacant site is very problematic. Vacant sites are really the cause for blight. We also know that under the GPP, the state rule for redevelopment, housing is not permitted. Under the old zoning, under the city zoning, housing was permitted. Under the GPP, housing, residential, is not a permitted use. So even if a developer wanted to build a residential building or partially residential, they can't. This community board is on record ad nauseam, calling for this GPP to be canceled, repealed, abandoned, torn apart, burnt, whatever we can do. This is another reason why this zoning doesn't work. Given that there is no current plan for any of these sites to actually be redeveloped from the ground up, and given that we have a vacant site, I think that it is important for us to call on the governor, who is the one who now has jurisdiction on the zoning of this particular site, to actually abandon the GPP and change the zoning for that particular site so that it can be redeveloped into residential. So I think that we have proudly been taking the lead on the advocacy in this area. I think we need to continue to do that. In the resolutions that we have passed about the GPP, We are advocating for more housing, so this is not a new position, and we have specifically asked for the community land trust model for a type of development of housing that would guarantee that housing would be permanently and deeply affordable. In any case, there is no other state housing program currently. The 421A has sunset, so it's no longer in the books. Community land trusts are gaining quite a bit of momentum. There is a package of bills with the city council that would actually support such model. There's also a bill in Congress that would provide funding for community land trusts throughout the country. So that's for a little bit of context. What I would like for this committee to do is to think about the type of advocacy that we could take to actually call for what would be really right for this site. The building is raised. We don't know the fate of the other buildings. The GPP has been decoupled from Penn Station, so this is no longer part of the equation. It doesn't have to be a plan for the entire neighborhood. It could be abandoned entirely, and then the state could decide to act specifically on this side. So this is, that's why I wanted to put this on the agenda, for us to discuss, to think about what kind of advocacy we can take, and we can only do that if we have a position. So I think we should pass a resolution, present this to the full board so that we can move forward with our advocacy. EJ.
Sorry, just a couple of framing questions. Has Vornado, to our knowledge, completely abandoned their plans for the Penn 15 tower that was going to go in that location, or do we believe that's like still an option? They're still on the table.
So, once again, according to the statements by the chairman in front of the investors, which require truthful statements, the statements have been that there are no plans for any ground up development in the Penn area. Those are the statements.
Yep. Okay. My next question is for you. I mean, I think we're understanding that the GPP was always insane. I think separating this lot from the rest of the GPP makes a lot of sense. Is there any advantage to, even in our own position, keeping the option open for this site to maybe be combined with redevelopment of the rest of that super block, as we've thought about it in the past, as like an underdeveloped block, perhaps ripe for I'm thinking specifically 32nd Street to 34th Street, all the way to Herald Square. We've talked at various times in the past about that block as being like a potential site for a new arena or for other types of redevelopment. Is it worth being cognizant of that instead of just taking a position like solely limited to that particular site 7?
Yeah, so I think that, this is a very, very valid point. I think that we need to be able to hold multiple thoughts at the same time and advocate for different options, because what we know is that the status quo is untenable. It is really untenable. So if we manage to get all the stars lined up and MSG is in agreement, and Vornado is in agreement for redevelopment of an arena on this super block, and the political forces align, I think that will be a very big victory. And in the meantime, and we will continue to advocate for that. And in the meantime, we need to be able to advocate for other alternatives, which is why I think, we're able to say, we like a 8th Avenue entrance and MSG staying where it is, provided that, you move the columns and you do some structural work. Do we want MSG to move? Yes, we want MSG to move, but we also recognize that there could be an alternative that is less satisfactory, but something needs to happen. And I think the same kind of thinking goes with this particular advocacy. Would we want MSG to move to this super block? Yes, we would. Specifically encouraged by the fact that, they did state in front of this committee that, it would be a satisfactory location. But the likelihood that this will happen in the next 5 years is uncertain. I would certainly not put a number, a percentage of the.
Sure.
So I think that we need to not preclude that from happening, while at the same time recognizing that, we have a housing crisis.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And certainly there's a way to take a position where we're saying, option A or option B or option C or some combination of all these are still better than what we have now. Or this one or this other insane alternative that benefits nobody. And certainly we've seen unnamed proposals that envision an arena and, for residential towers on that same block. So those are also not incompatible.
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think that the one salient point here is that currently the GPP does not permit housing. So if you stay with the city zoning, you can actually develop a fully 100% residential building. That would be as of right. No variance, no waiver, as of right. Under the state law of the GPP, you're not permitted.
For this site,
For sites
yeah, not.
5, 6, 7, 8 of the GPP, you're only
For 1 and 4 and 8.
You're only allowed residential. Hold on, let me actually try to find it. I know I have it somewhere.
There's two on 8th Avenue and one, and they wasn't clear about the Manhattan Mall site. If they were allowing that or not.
I'm going to bring it up. I think it's.
Just to jump in while you're doing that.
Yeah.
So to me, like the vision for the new development of the super block, which would include a potential arena, I think there's a lot of precedent to look at in terms of the sort of downtown revitalization, which is a little bit different here because it doesn't really need revitalization, but the model of a sports arena adjacent to mixed-use commercial and retail is an argument that residential needs to be part of that equation. But it'd be interesting what is that appropriate balance? Because again, I think that's the way to recommend that site is that's essentially, if you're gonna redevelop that super block, the mix of residential is essential to sort of, what is that retail? You're basically building a new neighborhood that's either adjacent to the arena or part of the new entertainment complex. That's a mix of theater, entertainment, whatever you're gonna call that, but that's been done in almost lots of major cities, and the mix of residential is vital for that development to be successful, because you're essentially looking at it holistically as a gathering place, as a public square, as shopping and housing, shopping, at the whole mix. So it's like, I don't know how that has to be part of the recommendation of that super block.
So I think that, rather than calling it a super block, I think that it is going to be important for us to stick with what we have. Because a super block is pure speculation on our end.
Right.
We want it to happen, absolutely.
Right.
But right now, what we know we have is actually a blind. We have a vacant site demolished with, entirely boarded up, and.
They just couldn't wait to tear it down. They just couldn't
And
wait.
this is bound to stay actually for quite a while. There is no plan in the foreseeable future for anything, and the rule precludes residential development.
But isn't it though a challenge? I totally get that and I support that. But if you look at the geography of this area, if you build a new tower on that site, you can't really fit an arena. You can't really do the concept of the development of the other things that could happen can't really exist, physically won't fit without that site being looked at more holistically. So if we advocate, oh, okay, we should build a residential tower with some retail, that does limit what happens around
Correct.
it.
No, I totally agree. I think that what we need to say is we don't have to be prescriptive, and we're not urban designers. And we, thank God, we don't have to say exactly, how it's going to look like. This is not our job. But our job is to say the tax needs to be, the GPP needs to be retired.
Yeah.
And that is yet another reason
Right,
why it
right.
needs to be retired. And then, I really think that there is an opportunity to build an arena and residential, and we've seen some iterations of that. But also we have to be pragmatic in the sense that, if all of a sudden a community land trust finds the funding to acquire the site and it can be redeveloped as housing, fully housing, permanently affordable, we would probably consider that a victory.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, a potential approach here is to once again, call for the GPP to be abandoned, reverted, rethought, brought back to the drawing board. For the following reasons. Number one, the GPP really was incredibly short-sighted in the way that it chose the lots and the way that it sliced up the potential of, the neighborhood. Preventing, certain holistic approaches to multi-use blocks. And then number two, by bizarrely excluding housing from some of the uses as was previously allowed by the city zoning. Is that kind of the approach that you're
Yeah,
envisioning?
yeah, I think that is fair.
So instead of just extracting this one site from the GPP, it's a call for the GPP to be retired.
Yes, I think on this one, that my sense is that we need to remain consistent.
Okay.
We need to say, this is yet another reason why, we see another flaw. I mean, the funding doesn't work. It's not supporting Penn Station.
I agree.
It is a free option that Vornado has to develop or not redevelop. It is entirely at their discretion and it's entirely free. I mean, it rarely happens in the world of business that, you have an option that you can exercise or not, and you don't have to pay for it.
Is it the same tight constellation of players who will determine that the GPP goes away?
Correct. It is
So
under the jurisdiction of ESD
Mhm.
and in the end of Governor Hochul. Yes. And I think that, housing is going to take center stage in the upcoming legislative session, and it is beyond absurd to think that on the one hand, the governor is advocating for more housing while she is preventing the construction of housing. She's denying our opportunity to actually address this major crisis that we have in CB5. And we have been consistent, and as Julie knows, as the vice chair of the BEX committee, for the past 10 years, housing has been our #1 priority. And having laws in the books for such a large swath of our districts that preclude housing is just absurd.
Can I just ask for this site in particular, it's Liz Kruger, and who are the other relevant?
Assemblymember Simone, Councilmember Butcher.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Doesn't the GPP have to be updated anyways with this whole pandemic and the return?
No.
His office use is not,
The
Desires.
GPP lives until someone decides to use it. And once again, it is, we have to see it as an option that is basically a free option for the landowner to do whatever they want. They don't have to give back anything. They don't have to invest in the district in the meantime. There is literally no provision. And by the way, the landowner still has the opportunity to use the city underlying zoning if they so choose. So it is entirely at their discretion. And I think that for us, the critical bit is really that, we have, a tragic housing crisis and an affordability crisis more than anything in CB5. And, this is a very large site, and under the right program, we could actually see the creation of a very, very large number of housing units. And they could be, deeply and permanently affordable. So we cannot let that opportunity, be taken away from us.
I think it would be just restating our board's position on this
Yes,
as
yes,
this opportunity.
absolutely. I mean, we're not really, stating anything terribly new,
added urgency of the.
other than adding the urgency.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So do we feel that this is right for, being presented to exec so that we can move forward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we take once again, it's not a vote, it's more like a survey of our group, but so that I can present that to exec. So basically, our resolution would state what we have just said. We want the GPP to be repealed. We want housing to be a development conforming use. And there's urgency to actually do that.
And we would address this towards the governor or ESD or both.
I think it would be addressed to both ESD and the governor, yes. Okay, so once again, it is not a motion, which is why I can state all of that. Just by a show of hands, is everybody on board?
Can I just make one provision that we say that this is not an alternative, that we prefer the arena to move to that site, and if that is not possible, then this would be our second
Yes,
choice.
or would you consider actually saying that we don't see one necessarily being opposed to the other? Because we know that, there is an iteration where the arena is there, and then there's housing.
Yeah, I just don't want them to say that, okay, we want the complete Hotel Pennsylvania site to be all one massive housing structure. And then there'll be constituents there to fight against the arena moving.
Correct, yes, okay, yeah, that's, I think, accurate and fair.
I just like, obviously live and die for affordable housing, but I think that MSG moving into that site is imperative. would be an even bigger win.
Yes,
But it is the basic, the separating Penn Station is the biggest problem because it's a transit center.
Yes.
Yeah.
Housing
Yeah.
should be part of transit centers, but to have all of those subway stations, the pass station, and not have commercial use doesn't make sense either.
yes, yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I think so, we recognize that, this advocacy should not be seen as conflicting with the arena relocation possibility. Okay, all right. So all those in favor of this, we can actually just do the, okay, so for the record, everybody has their hand up. All right, beautiful. Thank you very much. One more item that we need to discuss tonight. Still connected to the Penn Station GPP, as part of the approved GPP, ESD undertook to create a public realm task force. The Public Realm Task Force was appointed, I think, early last year, and was made up of representatives of elected officials, city agencies, MTA, Amtrak, MSG, Vornado, community boards 4 and 5, along with some civic group representatives. The task force met a total of 5 times, and the discussions were led by a consultant who then put together a list of recommendations. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I can do that. Let's see what happens if I share my screen. Okay. So this is the document that was created by the consultant on behalf of ESD as part of the Public Realm Task Force recommendation. So this was part of meeting 5. This was presented actually in a public meeting, and it restated the initial goals, the principles, and then the public realm plan. So very quickly, so these are the members. So you can see the governor's office, the Department of City Planning, the borough president, the electeds, the MTA, Amtrak, Vornado, and others were members of this initiative. The goals were around mobility, unified transportation hub, a green district, accessibility. The task force talked about the pedestrian experience, wayfinding, accessibility, climate responsiveness. We looked at examples elsewhere. We talked a lot about wayfinding, transit connections, accessibility, lighting, seating, programming and activation, landscape. Talked about freight, which is a big part of public realm around Penn Station, with a variety of freight needs. Waste management, and then there was some feedback given by the members of the task force on these specific points. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the principles. I have shared this presentation with you all, and you can go back and look at it. But basically, the big thing was really pedestrian mobility in the district, and The recommendation of the Public Realm Task Force is basically to focus on one narrow area. So the one thing that I need to explain is that as part of the GPP, the governor has committed $50 million to be allocated to a public realm project in the area immediately and before anything starts. So this is not earmarked against any, development that would, generate any revenue. This is just, funding that has been committed. Little caveat on that, we actually do not know where the funding would come from. We don't know if it's appropriated through the general budget or if it's coming from ESD funds. There's a little bit of ambiguity on that, but nonetheless, there's a commitment of for 15 million. The recommendation of the task force, as presented in this meeting that happened a couple of weeks ago, would be for the funding to basically be concentrated on this particular block. So it would be entirely on West 32nd Street. And it would see the construction on 7th Avenue of a raised crosswalk. And then West 32nd Street would be rebuilt with trees, a pedestrian treatment, possibly granite pavers, and benches, some wayfinding elements, and lighting is a big emphasis. So that would be the scope of the first phase of public realm improvement in the area. So that would take up the entire $50 million. The response from the members of the task force, as well as other members of the CACWAG, the Community Advisory Committee Working Group, that is a broader group, was pretty unanimously a comment of concern about this proposal. The main reasons for the concern and the lack of support were mostly that, in essence, given that we do not know what developments are going to come, it is totally premature to decide to work on a street that may need very, very vastly different programmatic needs. We don't know if those buildings that are slated for redevelopment are going to be big, small, commercial, residential. Are they going to need a curb cut? Are they going to need access for, is there going to be an arena? There's just so much uncertainty that it is very likely that we would end up spending $50 million to have to rip up all these improvements because they simply don't fit the programmatic needs of the developments that would come on these sites. The other criticism that was raised is that the big, really acute critical issue with the public realm currently is not really on the side streets. It's not on the east-west circulation, but it is really on the avenues, on the north-south pedestrian and vehicular transportation access. So the concerns were shared by Committee Board 4, Committee Board 5, MAS, and even the 34th Street Partnership bid, which usually has a position that is at odds with CB5. That has been, mostly the case in the review of this GPP. There was total unison on this one. Especially the 34th Street partnership believes that this funding would be much better spent on the 6th Avenue and Broadway area, where we know that NYC DOT has a set of programmings that they want to build around Harold and Greeley squares. The congestion, the pedestrian congestion at this area is just absolutely astounding, and there is great opportunity to actually put this funding to good use. Listening to those comments, I felt it was very sensible. But again, when I do sit on the task force. I have, stated some of my own opinions, but now we need to, in order to really be effective in making our voices heard, the board needs to take a position on that. So which is why, I felt it was important to present that. Also for, full context, we did reach out to ESD and we invited them to come to this meeting. They felt that it was premature, and also they felt that we're giving them short notice. So this is why I'm giving the presentation and they're not. They have clearly stated that, there is nothing finalized, but at the same time, as far as we are concerned, we need to know what is being presented so that we can respond. And, I cannot just say, I think A, B, and C. I have to be, carrying the voice of the entire board so that I can adequately represent the community. So very long presentation on that.
Can I ask a question? How did they settle on this block? Is it just that it is proximate to two of Vornado's sites?
There was no direct explanation to that.
I don't even know what to say. It wasn't the Franciscans. I mean, who else is on that block that's pushing for this? It just, I'm just stating,
You mean 32nd?
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
back,
back.
that's the back entrance to St. Francis's Church there. They
Yeah.
have a courtyard there. I don't.
I was gonna ask
And they
something
hope-
similar, like
and
where,
they hope-
was there data to show that there was, like, what
Yes.
are they trying to fix on 32nd,
Exactly.
right? Was there data showing?
No.
that?
That's what I was gonna, was this something to do with the Gimbel's passageway? Were they gonna fix that underneath?
No.
Okay,
It is entirely separate,
all right.
I mean, it's
entirely separate.
partially pedestrianized already with the, granite blocks by DOT.
Well, just an
Right.
observation, until the city gets serious about creating a task force to enforce bike, e-bike, moped laws, there's gonna be no safety in the public realm anywhere. Until they do that, so all this is just window dressing. Until they solve this problem, it's ruining the whole city. And that's what that money should be spent on.
Yeah, and I have to say that this would not be entirely pedestrianized. So vehicular traffic would still be permitted. And especially because they made it very clear that there is a very big need for carting of for waste management. So garbage trucks would still be able to drive on this street. It would be managed in the sense that it wouldn't be at random times of day. It would be at specific times, but there would be vehicular traffic. I would also state that the Department of Transportation had some interesting questions about the choice for 32nd Street, where they had some interrogations.
Julie, didn't you have like a proposal about bathrooms at Harold Square or Greeley Square before?
They already have it. 34th Street Partnership.
Greeley Square, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Greeley Square, yeah.
So what do we want to do? Do we want to, you know, I'm gonna state, well, actually, you know what, let me open up to, okay, just to, follow our rules. I'm going to open up the floor to, questions and comments from members of the public. If there are members of the public who wish to speak, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you have a question. Any questions or comments from, members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, let's move to business session. EJ.
When there was discussion of recommending Sixth Avenue instead for the investment, was Macy's represented at all by that group, or any talk of Macy's plans for the redevelopment of?
These plans have been abandoned.
Okay.
They have been entirely and formally abandoned.
Are you referring to the tower above Macy's, or are you referring to redevelopment of the station and Herald Square? Because I mean, they may have been linked and they may have been both abandoned, but I'm guessing curious
So
which one you're referring to.
the deal with Macy's was that they were going to get an upzoning in exchange for these improvements.
Okay,
So no tower, no improvement.
got it. Okay.
DOT was very clear that, NYC DOT was very clear that as part of their Broadway vision and all the work that they're doing on Broadway, this could fit, like they have a truckload of, pardon the pun, an e-bike load of projects that are ripe for construction in that particular area. So they don't have to reinvent any wheel. They don't have to do any new assessment of, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Does it work with the, pedestrian vehicular flow of traffic? What unintended consequences are we creating? They have projects that are ripe.
Shovel ready. Okay.
And I think that, one concern that was raised is Sixth Avenue is actually far from Penn Station, and therefore the public realm over there is not connected to Penn. But the reality is that the pedestrian traffic at Greeley is entirely Penn related. If there were no train station, and a subway line that is in that particular location, this pedestrian traffic and congestion would not exist.
That's just, so what was their reply to this unified pushback? CB4, CB5, and
The reply was, we heard you, once again, we are at this stage where, they were seeking feedback. So, they.
Is there a next step? In other words,
So the next step is probably, taking more intake of formal feedback, which is why,
Okay.
it is important for us, to take a position that is a real position, not just,
right.
So, I think, and I will make my comment, I think that spending those funds on Sixth Avenue and Broadway is very wise. I think that, if this is what NYC DOT thinks is preferable, we should absolutely support the city agency and the connectivity between Sixth Avenue, Harold Greeley and Penn must be improved. And the congestion is there. The congestion is not on 32nd Street. So this is where the funding should go.
And is CB4 gonna make a similar, do we know?
In essence, no, because Greeley is in CB5.
Okay, just
So,
curious.
yeah.
Okay.
And the overhead lighting portion is not street lamps, it's additional strings of lights, it's not.
So the lighting scheme was not totally developed. So, you know, what you see on this particular slide here, I don't know if I can make that a little bigger, is just an example. It doesn't have to be this way, but they talked about lighting the buildings, lighting the facades. But basically, you know, putting a big emphasis on, you know, there has to be light. And, you know. it
And
has-
not on
it-
the street, that reflect off the building.
Yes,
I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think the huge majority of the people getting off at Greeley and Herald Square are headed towards the train station. I think investing on that Sixth Avenue corridor maximizes the impact instead of doing one of arguably the three side streets that people scatter down to head west towards the train station. And it's part of the Broadway corridor, and it's much more likely to have a long-standing impact than if you rip up 32nd Street now and then rip it up again a year and a half later.
yeah, totally. So on this one, you know, same thing, I really feel that we need to take a position and we need to do it now. So that we can continue to meaningfully engage with this process. So, you know, although it's not really formally an application on this one, I think that we should make a motion and take it to a vote. So, motion,
Motion to recommend that the funding be recommended for Sixth Avenue.
Second.
all right. So let's take this to a vote. That will be the final vote of the evening. Thank you so much for your patience.
Okay, Mike,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
BJ,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Aaron's a yes, Leila.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0-0-0.
Okay. Thank you very much to all. Are there any new business to be discussed? All right, then the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays to all.
You too.